can only imagine when that day comes.
Good morning, everybody. This morning we're going to continue with Psalm 15 and may get to 16. But we're not wanting to belabor too much, but we're not in a hurry either. And so I hope that everybody will feel like we've been benefited for being here together. I got through all the introduction last time, and we'll come here in just a moment and just read the psalm and then go back and work through it. It's good to see each of you. It's a beautiful day. And they say we're going to get a little fall weather. You know, it happens every year about this time. And so we're always thankful for the changing of the seasons because they do show us that the Lord's still there. Good to see Brother Gurley here today. He's got a new eye or eyes? Just one, okay. And probably do the other one later. I don't know, but okay. He said he's not winking at me. That's good. Let's have a prayer together this morning. Lord, we're thankful for this beautiful day, and we're thankful for our time together to delve into your word. And we pray that what's said and what's done will be helpful to brethren, and will help us to conduct ourselves in a way that's more pleasing in your sight and contemplate the great blessing we have to dwell among your people. For this we ask in Jesus' name. Amen. The psalmist begins, this is a psalm that it asks a question and then proceeds to answer it. Our Lord, who may abide in your tent? Who may dwell on your holy hill? He who walks with integrity and works righteousness and speaks truth in his heart. He does not slander with his tongue, nor does evil to his neighbor, nor takes up a reproach against a friend, in whose eyes a reprobate is despised, but who honors those who fear the Lord. He swears to his own hurt and does not change. He does not put out his money at interest, nor does he take a bribe against the innocent. He who does these things will never be shaken. Now, so there we are. Begins with the question, who can dwell in God's presence? And that's the thing that we ought to give serious thought to, because he don't really need us in one way. We need him. But there are requisites. There are things that have to be in place in order to dwell in his presence. And so the psalm begins with this probing question. O Lord, who may abide in your tent? That is to say, who is fit to dwell in the presence of the Almighty? Who's fit to dwell with him? The parallel line adds, and who may dwell on your holy hill? Who's prepared to be in your presence? These questions are asked of God, is the way it's presented here in this first verse. And then the body of the psalm gives God's answer. And his answer should cause us to go into our own hearts and minds, not about somebody else, but examine me and try to answer that question, and especially relative to the worship of God. Worship is not a thing to be, and I know you know that, but it should be said, it's not a thing to be approached lightly. And when we come into the presence of the one who spoke it into being and who sustains it by the word of his power, and who will bring it all to an end when the time comes that only he knows. The psalm seems to fuse together the ideas of coming to worship God and remaining in his presence. So the heart of the psalm is a detailed answer to the overarching questions. Who can come and reside with you? Who can stay with you on a continual basis, be a permanent resident, if you will? The word abide or sojourn conveys the idea of staying as a resident alien. When I go down to Guatemala, they're always kind enough. They'll ask you how long you want to be there, and I'll tell them a week, and they always grant 90 days. I can be there 90 days if I wanted to, with their permission. That's fine. Now, you don't want to go over that without, if you need to stay longer, you need to make some other arrangements. But they grant that. And so this psalm is asking, who can stay in God's presence? Abide or sojourn conveys that idea, and it has a permanence to it, and it is the result of having a very gracious host. And isn't God gracious? We see that in the corporeal realm, don't we? I talk about it a lot, and I'm probably going to keep doing that. So I don't want to bore you at all, but we're in the fall garden, and God's blessed it. And all of that just comes and is very gracious on his part, is it not? Because he sends the rains, he sends the sunshine, he provides the atmosphere, and all of that is his doing. And all that we have to do is get out there and plant it, wait for it to grow, and pick it and take care of it. And so he is very generous, and we see that. And he promises that he'll continue to be generous to those that are his people and part of his community. And that has the idea here, this word dwell, suggests being a part of the family of God, moving in to become a member of his community. I think of the tribes of Israel, or the clans of Scotland, which are just tribes. That's Gaelic. The Mitchells that live up around Aberdeen came over to Scotland a long time ago as hired soldiers. And they stayed, and they were granted to be a subset of the Ennis clan. And what is that? Well, that's you just come and become part of their community, part of that tribe. And so that's the kind of idea that's been dealt with. And the psalmist is not interested in somebody that wants to just come to the Lord's house like a tourist and go through the house and look at all of his stuff and then go on down the road. That's not at all what's been talked about. This is the idea of somebody coming in and becoming a part of it. I don't know if any of you have ever had the privilege of going to Bellingrath Gardens in Alabama. I don't remember the big man, the wealthy man that who owned the house, but I can remember from the time of my childhood going through that, and even as a kid, I thought this is pretty nice setup this guy's got, and you could walk around on the grounds in the garden a good bit of a day just looking at the things that he had. But this is not a brief visit kind of thing. This is not a tourist kind of thing. He has in mind the person who intends to remain indefinitely in God's holy presence. God answers him. Answers the question in verses 2 to 4. I'll just cite them again for emphasis. He who walks with integrity and works righteousness. He who speaks the truth, watch it, in his heart. He does not slander with his tongue, nor does evil to his neighbor, nor takes up reproach against his friend, in whose eyes a reprobate is despised, but who honors those who fear the Lord. He swears to his own hurt and does not change. And so the answer to this deeper question about who is prepared to live in your presence is given from two different viewpoints, a positive one and a negative one. 11 parts, not including the final affirmation. 11 parts to the answer are presented. And this list of qualities is general. It's not exhaustive. The fruit of the Spirit in Galatians 5, is it love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, temperance? Against such there is no law. That's not an expansive list. That's a general list of the kind of person. And you get that. Well, that's what this is. Not intended to be exhaustive, but it's a general portrait given to those who are welcome to be a guest of the Lord and continually enjoy his protection and his hospitality. Dine at his table, if you will. Integrity is the core trait of that list. Verse 2, who then will be admitted into God's presence, and who's going to receive the opportunity to continue to dwell with him? Well, the beginning of the of the positive part of that answer is this. The one who dwells with God is the one who persistently pursues the right. He is to possess integrity. 3 fundamental areas are cited: in his thoughts, in his actions, in his deeds, the things he pursues, is his work. The characteristic, this characteristic will affect his innermost thinking. And that in turn will affect what? It'll affect his words. It'll affect his walk, the way he conducts himself, the way he is. And it will affect the works that he pursues, the way he goes at them, the way he is on the job, the degree of integrity that he shows. You know, he's a man that's going to be where he said he's going to be, when he said he's going to be there, going to do the work that he agreed to do. He's going to accept the amount of money that he said he would accept, unless he's gotten authorization for something else, you know, if something comes up. But don't just go out and squander somebody else's money, which is what he could do, what some of them do. I don't know how many people through the years that have come here in the building trades, and I've told them that very thing. If you want to make it in Polk County, there are a lot of retired people here. They're not multimillionaires, but they got a few coins, and they'll pay for work, but and there's work to be done. But if you want to do it, you want to be successful at it, be where you say you're going to be, when you say you're going to be there. Do what you said you were going to do, and do it for the money that you agreed to take, and you'll have more work than you can do, because that'll get around fast. That's the kind of character that he's talking about here. And he's working from his heart. This honest heart reveals itself in an upright life. I remember the first little place I preached, Bethel Springs, Tennessee. I had 2 elders most of the time, Brother Johnny Plunk and Brother Leonard Hips. I'm sure that they're probably both going on to be with the Lord by now. And they were both master carpenters. But beyond that, they were people throughout that whole region that their word was not questioned. And I remember particularly when Brother Leonard tried to retire, people wouldn't let him. You know, they wanted him to build their house. And he would try to beg off. No, because it's going to be as Brother Simpson would say, square and plumb when he got through with it. That's the only way he did it. And people kept him employed all those years. He's a good man, good, both of them, fine, godly man. But that heart is going to, if that heart's present in a man, it's going to reveal itself in the way he does his business, isn't it? And it's going to reveal itself in the way he is with his family. It's going to reveal itself in the way he is with his friends. It could be characterized, this man is one who walks with integrity. That is, it is the habitual course of his life is to live blamelessly before God. And the word for integrity here means blameless, and sometimes it's translated perfect. King James Version will translate it that way a lot of times. Nothing wrong with that, but you have to keep in mind it does not mean sinless perfection, but rather it connotes perfection in the sense of sincerely seeking to do God's will always. No legitimate accusation can be brought against this man. Integrity is wholehearted devotion to God and complete forthrightness in dealing with others. That's the way he is. That's the way he lives his life. That's the way he conducts himself. Of course, the thing I'm needing to be getting out of that, okay, Lindell, you're hearing God's answer. You need to be that man. And to say it another way, the one who pleases God works or exhibits righteousness. That's what God requires. That's the way God is. And he requires that in his servants. The idea behind the 2 phrases is that people who wish to have fellowship with God do what's right and speak truth. And they speak that truth because that character springs from their very nature. In that, their heart resembles God's heart. And their good lives flow out of that godlike spirit that lives within them. In other words, they've adopted the Lord's attitudes. They've adopted the way that the Lord conducts himself. They're living like the Lord does. And that comes to the surface, bubbling up like an artesian well, you know. And so the man who speaks the truth in his heart is the man who's absolutely sincere with himself, with others, and with God. You know, a lot of times, we all know this, people have this facade that they show the world. But it may not, sometimes it's not who they are. You know, you see people do these horrific things, and we're running into a lot of abuse, particularly of children. And you see the perpetrator, and they don't look like the devil in flesh that they are. They don't look that way. When many reasons you would get that idea. But when a man turns himself over to the adversary, anything can happen. And so there we are. And so this man exhibits the righteousness of his life, and he speaks it in his heart. Genuineness and transparency make up his private conversations. Telling the truth with our lips is important, but speaking the truth from our heart to ourselves and to God is more important, because that's the fountainhead that produces all our other thinking. And so you hear, I have heard people talk about being real, and that's a good emphasis. What they mean by that, being genuine, being transparent. Not only with the neighbors, that's good, but transparent with yourself. Transparent with the Lord. Come clean on it, own it. I always, when I'm working with inmates, or anybody else for that matter, but when working with inmates, and particularly if I'm dealing with an offender that I know something about the case, I always feel a lot better when he owns whatever he's in there for. You know, not bragging about it or anything like that, but just owns it. With himself, with the Lord, he's in a place now he can begin to heal. He can begin to go in a different direction. And I've seen, only a few, but I've seen some guys have great success. Great success. And they're very different people today than they were at one time. And so that I mean, if we don't believe that, we ought to quit, take the sign down, go on to the house, right? Sell the building, split the money if we don't believe people can redeem themselves. But it's hard. It's very hard. God looks in verse 3 not only at what people are and what they do, but he also looks at what they allow and what they oppose. Because there's some people that will enjoy sin vicariously. They won't do it personally, but they enjoy it through other people. And that manifests itself in the kind of books they read, the kind of movies they watch, the kind of venues that they expose themselves to. The righteous man depicted in this psalm follows hard after God's heart. Consequently, he does not slander or malign others. Now, you can disagree. Some people misinterpret, I think, what's being said in passages like this, that you can't ever disagree with anybody about anything. No, that's not correct. But you can disagree and be honest with it without maligning that person. It's possible, is it not, to disagree with somebody, even strenuously, that you respect as a person of integrity. I remember Brother Guy Woods one time was talking about criterion for engaging in public debate. He engaged in hundreds. And he said, well, he had just 2 or 3. He said, one thing is whatever he's espousing a danger to the brethren where you are. Is it exposing them to something that's going to hurt them? You can't let that go by. Or do you have an opportunity to approach his audience with the truth and help lead them to a better place? Number three, Brother Aiden, I'll get right to you. Number three, can you say or view that man as just as honest in his position as you are? Because if you can't, then you have no business engaging in it. It's just going to be a yammer, and that's not what it's about. It's about finding truth, Brother Aiden. Yeah. Until we can get through, at least work through it. Because if you can't even talk to each other, if I say you and I are in disagreement, and then the first thing out of my mouth when you and I come together is I start making disparaging and insulting comments, acting as if you're not just as sincere in what you believe as I am in what I believe. How far is that going to get? I mean, you going to convince somebody doing that? We look at our political thing now, and you got two parties, and what do? You another one, and back and forth. Some of it just childish behavior. People that are sitting in the Congress of the United States of America, and they get out there and get to name call and eat one another. And, if the leaders do that, what are the people going to do? Well, they're going to go fist city, So you got to be, there again, this man, he doesn't slander. He's not going to do that. If he disagrees, he's going to disagree right up front, but he is not going to go around trying to gather morsels of gossip to spread. And I've seen this, for example, on both sides in the past few years. They find something some guy did when he was a goofy freshman in college 40 years ago that he's not continued to exhibit that kind of behavior. In other words, he grew up at some point. Well, does that need to be thrown out in the public? What purpose does that serve? Now, if you're going to ask, did this person ever do anything silly? Well, the answer is going to be yes. How has he lived his life in these intervening years, or she? How have they conducted themselves? How are they in their dealings with other people? And that tells the story. Well, he's not looking for morsels of gossip to spread and go through the community with his tongue. He's not going to be used for vilification. You can spin stuff and vilify nearly about anybody. In fact, you watch some of what I've been talking about, and they just make stuff up. This man does not soil his lips with that which is injurious to the reputations of others. So when people throw that stuff out there, give an example. They recently very quietly exonerated those Border Patrol officers that they had accused, high government officials had accused of whipping Haitian migrants with their reins on their horses. Didn't happen. Didn't hit anybody. And now how do they get their reputation back? If you don't look at that and know what you're seeing, but they'll help control that horse with that rein. They can get him to move and what have you, because he's seeing that rain. Ooh, I don't even hit me, My son had a horse one time, and he'd walk out there with a quirt and hang it on the saddle. Little horse, I better behave. I better mind my manners. You see, but they did that. Just on and on. There's just so many examples of. We all know what it is. And so we want to not be that person. In verse 4, truth in this guy's heart and on his lips. And he certainly doesn't take up a reproach against a friend. Integrity is his way of life. I had several years ago now, a thing that the brethren were kicking around. Brother Buster Dobbs was the guy everybody got after, And because I was his friend, I was guilty too. Well, the fact was they'd misrepresented him and certainly misrepresented me because I'd never written, said, thought, or done what they were saying. Do you know how many people came and talked to me? One brother. His name was Waylon Melton. Charlie and Sue remember Waylon. He said, "Can I come by and see you?" I said, "Yeah." I fixed him a dossier and had it waiting. And he looked through it. We talked about it. And he'd been a police officer down in Houston, so I knew he meant these words when he said to me. He said, "I got your back, brother." That was that one guy. And so if you have aught against your brother, what does the text say? Go talk to your brother. In fact, it gets worked out there. That's the optimal thing. That's the optimal thing. But people are sometimes loath to do that. It just, the old devil will get a hold of you, and you think you're on a crusade to save the world, Verse 4, this godly person gives inspiration to others who are in the right. He's going to back them. He's going to let it be known that he's backing them, and especially going to let them know that he's backing them. And he is just as equally going to discourage those who are in the wrong. He is a person in whose eyes the reprobate is despised. He can no more allow evil than he can personally participate in it. He's on the other side of that, just plain and simple. It's become the rage of the age now, all this talk about transsexuality and transgenderism and all that kind of thing. There is no such thing in fact. And that's just going to be a stubborn fact that won't go away. You got XX or XY chromosomes, and that's the way God did it. It's the way it is. And that's not a popular thing at all to say. But it is an ungodly thing to take some little child that's confused and mutilate them, trying to deny what God did. If God made you anatomically male, then that's the way you need to serve God. If he made you anatomically a female, then he's made a decision. And so people that advocate for this fluidity are mistaken. They're wrong. And so God calls those kinds of things wicked. And so this man who can dwell in God's presence is not going to welcome that any more than he's going to participate in it. And that's just one example. Anyone who has welcomed wickedness into his life can count on strong opposition from the one who walks with God. He's not going there. He will not fight that wickedness with brass knuckles or slapjack, but he's going to fight it, and he's going to fight it in the way that he lives his life. He's going to oppose evil with the dedication of his heart. He's going to oppose evil with his works. He's going to oppose evil by what he says. And having dedicated his life to righteousness, he's going to stand against all evil in print, in people, and in public speech. He has no intentions of condoning sin or supporting those who do. His war against wickedness and the harm that wicked people do is obvious to those who are in his circle of fellowship. The people that have been around that man of God are going to know that. The converse is also true. The righteous man is one that's certainly going to honor those who fear the Lord. He will applaud and bid Godspeed to anybody who is seeking to show proper respect for the Lord God. Further, he is a man who swears to his own hurt and does not change. I was talking to my wife this morning. I've said it in class before, but I had a couple of years ago, a man replumb our house. 84 years old, master plumber. Well, there was something that came up that was going to cost a little extra money, and I said to him, well, I'll cover that. No, sir, he said. I gave you a price. I stick with what I said. So I wanted, I'm just going to cover it. And I still wish you'd let me cover it, but he said, no, sir, I'm not going to do that. Well, I don't know if my endorsement has helped him or not, but I'd endorse him and do endorse him if he's still living. I think he's still working for agent now. And and man knows his business, and he'll do what he says. That's saying a lot about a man, isn't it? Saying a lot about him. Swears to his own hurt, does not change, keeps his word, even if it cost him, and he's got to pay a dear price for it. That's the best reminder, I guess, to pay attention to your business, is to have made the agreement and have to honor it when it bites a little bit. But you'll never make that mistake again if you do. This man believes that promises are made to be kept. And naturally, if he has made an inappropriate or a sinful promise, he's going to correct that in a righteous way as soon as possible. He would do that. People sometimes can get off into things that they never intended to, but he's going to correct it when it comes to his mind and his attention. But verse 15, look at the first part of that verse. He does not put his money at interest, nor does he take a bribe against the innocent. He's careful about his use of his funds. Now, stated very tersely and comprehensively, he does not put out his money to interest, doesn't try to profit from those that are in trouble. Spirituality and generosity live in the same heart. But now this statement that the psalmist makes about lending money has to be interpreted against the background of Israelite life. This is the Old Testament period. And in the community of Israel, money was loaned without interest to a brother in distress. As I understand it, they didn't expect you to be in that position unless you were in distress. And if you were in distress, they would come and help you. The Israelite was committed not to profit from helping a fellow Jew in trouble. However, he could charge interest to foreigners. Exodus 22:25, Leviticus 25:37, Deuteronomy 3:20. I could go on, Nehemiah 5:7, Proverbs 28, verse 8. Behind this law was the compassionate rationale that Israelites should care for one another like an extended family. And that's why the psalmist says that. Well, it's reflecting what the law says. The psalmist says that the person who has favor with God is one who shows humanitarian concern for others. Now, our system is set up on borrowing. It's a different kind of system. We can't, in this capitalist society, we can't operate if people can't borrow money and pay back. And of course, the people that are doing the loaning need to make some out of it in order to fool with it. I don't know how much it costs to put those bank buildings together. Nationals like to caved in down here. They had a really catastrophic thing take place, and they're now trying to effect a repair. I've never seen anything like that. But it costs a lot of money to put those facilities there and have that staff and all that. So that's the way they do it. And I heard Paul Harvey one time make a speech, and he said, our whole system depends on people being basically honest. Said it cannot work any other way because the money doesn't stay in the vault. The money's loaned out. It's loaned out to carpenters and plumbers and electricians and building contractors. It's loaned out to people that have businesses and that are doing commerce and all of that. They borrow that money. They put a project together. They sell the project and they make a little profit on it. That's the way it works. Israel was not set up that way. Small country, and they were looking at each other like a like an extended family. Now, having said that, that doesn't mean you go out and try to loan shark. I remember when we lived in Tennessee, there was a fellow in Selma that had a shoe store, and he's also a loan shark. And that old guy carried a pistol always. And you weren't going to beat him out of money, even though he was old when I knew him. And I was like, I'd go another direction. If you can't borrow it from the bank, you better stay away from guys like that. Better stay away from them. But right. Yeah, right. And that, yeah, absolutely, it sure does. Thank you for that point. I didn't check that. Usury. It's just when you got a guy in a bind, he's down, he's in trouble, and you're gonna compound that. I had a friend that lost a business one time, honest guy, but he got into some of that kind of stuff, and they cratered him. It was a small business. He believed these people would tell the truth and all that, and they were going to help him. Well, they helped him, all right, helped him into the poorhouse. And so you don't want to be involved in that kind of activity at all. Two different systems. They're just set up completely different. You can't, there's a limit set on what you can charge now, isn't there? Now, why credit card companies can charge people over 20% is a mystery to me. Because that, you get underwater on that thing and you never will get it paid off. But people will do that. They'll load it up. And it enslaves them. So, absolutely it's bondage. And this man's not going to do that. In addition, he doesn't take a bribe against the innocent. There's going back to his day and time. The righteous man does not set aside the truth or his moral obligations for the sake of money. Graft in any form is tragic, but bribery that involves taking advantage or results in the conviction of the innocent or the guiltless is especially repugnant to God. Again, you could look at Exodus 23 and verse 8, or Deuteronomy 10:17 and other passages. Just read in the text. That doesn't sit well with the Lord. The man of God will resist the temptation to succumb to the love of money, for to him, people are more important than any kind of financial gain. He's just not going to beat a guy when he's down. He lives his life on the divine principles that spring out of the character of God. And his life with God then has been surrounded with the loving kindness of the Lord, and he's absorbed that spirit. The Lord's that way, he's that way. And so the trait of goodness comes out in his treatment of other people. And his interpersonal relationships are coated with the kindness and the gentleness with which God's treated him. He's going to pass that, to others. He's going to treat others like God's treated him. Well, see, if everybody treated others like God treats us, the world would be a better place, wouldn't it? There's a promise at the end. He who does these things will never be shaken. A final word. Just a brief consolation is given about the one who pleases God. He is consistent in his faithfulness, and he will not be affected by the changing winds of life, that is in his spirit. Sometimes we get, this world's all we know, isn't it? That's what we experience the most. And we're rightly concerned about stuff here, but here's not what's most important, is it? Eternity is what's really important. And we want to, as much as we can, have a focus there. It's not that you don't take care of your business, your responsibilities on this side of eternity. That's what this man is doing. But we're not going to stay here, are we? Well, there's a song, I'd like to stay here longer than man's allotted days, but it's acknowledging you're not going to. So, and so we want to be be ready. And this man's not going to be affected by the changes of life. He's going to have good days and bad days. There are going to be times of celebration, times of deep grief and sorrow. He'll not lose his hold of God, and God's not going to lose his hold on him. And he stands firm in what's right, no matter what comes. The promise is this: he who does these things will not be shaken. He'll dwell with God. He'll make his home with God. He must live in a world that has gone astray from God's will. He has to do that. You and I have to do that. But God's his rock. God's his protection. God's his source of life. And so he's not going to be overwhelmed by the things in this world that are an offense to his sensibilities. I think sometimes what it must have been like to Jesus is and I don't know when he became aware, at a pretty early age he was aware of the mission, because when he was 12 and they went had to go back to the temple to run him down, find him, and he was kind of shocked that they didn't know where to look, like, don't you know, that must be about my Father's business. But I just wonder, what he saw, and I mean, from a physical standpoint, he'd never been physical till he took up the flesh and came as a man, and how that must have offended his senses. The way it looked, the way it smells, the way it is. I used to tell people, sometimes going in one of these prisons, you can just almost feel the hate. It's just almost tangible sometimes. Well, that's a bad environment for a human being. It is for the security. It's necessary, but it's a difficult situation on both sides of that. Psalm 16, the superscription, Michtam. Uh-huh. Do all that. So that's a good sermon outline. So if you ever get caught in a bind and have to preach, you got it. Psalm 15, verse 1 is the right question. 2 through 4 gives the answer to what he's asked. And particularly the latter part of verse 5 is the right promise. So there's your sermon outline. That's it. And that's in a very succinct way what the Psalm's about. Come to 16, Psalm 16 is about God the Supreme. It's a psalm of praise. The ancient heading there is a Michtam of David. It's by, to, for David. It's one of David's psalms, I think. 5 others have this ancient designation, 55 through 60. The term Michtam is a word that has been brought over from the Hebrew into the English, and it's a transliterated form, and it's really unclear what it means. Some of the stuff is so old. Scholars have tried to trace its root meaning, gold, and have argued that the word means that it's a golden song. Well, I don't know how much you know about the etymology of words, but if you've ever had a chance, and it's a fun exercise to look at an Oxford Unabridged Dictionary to the English language, it's about this thick. And in libraries that have them, they usually have them on a stand and they're opened up. You open that thing up sometime and go look at the word R-U-N and look at all the different uses the word has had in the English language through the years. I mean, it's meant everything. Now we think about running down at the park. I do, or running on the field somewhere. But it's meant a number of things. On the instrumental music question, there are people, the word psalane, psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs on psalane, they'll say, well, see there, that meant to play an instrument. Well, it did at one time. But when Paul wrote and said psalms, hymns, spiritual songs, psalane meant to sing, unaccompanied. The etymology had changed, so you've got to set that word in the context where Paul used it. You see that? Because that changes. So you could say, aha, there it is. I've got a debate point. In fact, there was a fellow that debated one of our brethren one time, and he was sincere, but that's what he came out with. And so he had to point out to him, well, yeah, but we need to look at what the word meant when Paul used it. And so you have that. So, well, we don't know what it means. To get back to this word, some think it means a golden psalm. Others believe it is a poem, and it is a poem of epigrammatic character. That is, it's a clever poem. It is that. I don't know if that's what that word means. Still others believe it's some kind of a musical term. We don't know. And so maybe that's what I was led with. We don't know what it means. The New Testament confirms that this is a psalm of confidence in God, and it's a prophecy of the Messiah's relationship to the Lord in his life and in his resurrection from the dead. If you go to Acts chapter 2, verses 25 through 28, and verse 31, and in chapter 13 and 35 of Acts, you get a New Testament interpretation of this psalm. Furthermore, Peter testifies to the Davidic authorship of the psalm that he clearly states in Acts chapter 2, verse 25. Peter, who's inspired, says David wrote it. The writer sings of how good God has been and is to him. He does so. As he does so, he says the greatest blessing that he's received from the Lord, and I love this, is the Lord himself, the giver instead of his gifts. And I think about that. The Lord himself is the greatest gift. To be with him, to be in the heavenly home where his majesty is. I don't know if we're going to disturb those folks out in the foyer or not, but he is the gift. And you think about, for example, maybe your parents or a sibling or somebody that's, done nice things for you and done, given you gifts and shared stuff with you. But really the most important thing is that person. They're the gift. Your spouse is your gift. And you should be your spouse's gift. That's a great thing. And God is the great gift that we have. And the psalmist sees that and sings about it to the Lord. It is the Lord himself, the giver, instead of the gifts. And his anthem of praise describes the good life that he has with God. The joys that he's known, the pleasures that he anticipates in the days to come. And in a much deeper sense, as substantiated by the New Testament interpretation of the psalm, it gives a prophetic picture of the walk that the Messiah would have with his Father. And you think about the ministry of Jesus, it was quite clear, was it not, that he and the Father were one. I'm scheduled to be down south here before too many days go by and teaching the course of the Godhead. And one of the things that you explore and try to explore is how there's three who are one and one who is three. I mean, when you get all that figured out, let me know. God bless you, and we thank you for being here today. Lord willing, we'll be together next time and look at Psalm 16.